I definitely want to get into chatting about Elevate, but I actually have a lot of questions of sort of like everything kind of led up to it. I was
Totally.
looking at doing some research on you, and I saw first of all you went to my alma mater, Illinois State. I just
Right.
saw that. Uh, how I have to ask how did you like ISU? What was ISU like in the 80s?
Um, for me, it's interesting because I was not a great student in high school. I just wasn't really into school. So when I went to decide which schools to go to, ISU was like the best of the lot, and it was good. In the
Hmm.
end, my time in college was a time where I engaged myself in education. I just poured myself in education because I'd never invested in education all the way up until then. And so my time at ISU was really, you know, outstanding for me in a growth way because I learned so much. I didn't go to class to take classes. I really dug in deep to try to understand the topics. I was just
Hmm.
talking to my wife about this last night. And there are things that I know so intrinsically well because I just took them apart, studied things. I became a math tutor, algebra tutor in my
Hmm.
sophomore year. I was a teacher's assistant. I was one of the top students in the business school. I had a business degree and also a software development degree. I mean, I just loved education and I
Hmm.
loved learning. So my time at ISU was like a completely like evolutionary time for me as an individual, but it's also an amazing, great school. I mean, I had such a great time. There were a bunch of guys that went there from my high school, so we, from freshman year on, I had a bunch of friends that I knew. Um, but I loved it. It was good spirit. The people, good quality people. Just a really good experience. How
Hmm.
about you? How was your experience at ISU?
Yeah, I loved it. It was great. I was always pretty pretty good grades in high school at sports and academics. I like to think I kind of thrived in high school, and but then when it came time to pick a school, I was all over the place. I was like, do I go to a really small school? Do I go to a giant? I mean, I looked at like Augustana, and then I also looked at like
Oh,
the
okay.
University of Texas. I was like across the board, and ISU was close enough to home, but far enough away that I felt like I was away, and it was big, but it kind of felt small, and I didn't know a
Yeah,
lot of
yeah.
people. I didn't know a lot of people that went there, and I don't know if you were the same, but I kind of went into it. I was passionate about like you know psychology and criminal justice, and I thought that's what I was going to do, and then took a couple classes and got a couple C's, and I was like, this is not a good start.
Right.
And then I sort of discovered marketing, and then I was just kind of off to the races, and I found the thing that I was really into. So, but I loved ISU. It was great. Um, and then yeah, coming out of school, I had my degree in marketing and then insurance. Weirdly, insurance is very big at ISU, being in
It
Bloomington
is,
Normal.
yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, I came out with a pretty clear vision of wanting to be in marketing and wanting to work for agencies, marketing, advertising. So I ended up doing that. But I'm curious if like with your college experience and coming out of college, did you because I know one of your first sort of stops in your career was Granger, and I'm guessing that's where you took a lot of your business and technology and sort of software experience you got at ISU. Did you know kind of coming out of school that you wanted to land at a company like Granger? What was the story of kind of how you ended up
That's
there?
that's actually a good story. So I'll take you back a little bit.
Yeah.
When I was a young guy, I was very enterprising. I mean, very young age. You know, 10, less than 10. Everything from newspaper routes, snowy days, putting a shoulder on my shoulder and walking around house to house, asking if people wanted their driveway shoveled, mowing lawns. I
Hmm.
started a small business with a buddy of mine when I was 17 years old, a janitorial service. All kinds of things,
Wow.
right?
Yeah.
When I went to college, I got into business. And within a very short amount of time, I realized that, I'm not going to graduate from ISU and run a company because I was studying management because I love business.
Hmm.
And on the side, I actually used to do software development when I was a kid. I did small programs in basic language. And so I said, you know what, I'm gonna do that. It wasn't a thing yet because that was like 1983, so it was just starting to kind of take some root. The new Apple IIs were out, and it was
Hmm.
very beginning of Apple computers and very beginning of IBM PCs. And but I enjoyed it, and I was good at it. It was easy for me. So I wound up going more in this direction. I changed from business to software development, information systems. So when I got out of college, I then had opportunities to work in software development, which I took because they were lucrative. But within a year, I didn't like it. My first job was at Northern Trust Bank. It was a great
Hmm.
company, and it was an outstanding position, great opportunity. But within just a year, I realized like I was in a cube doing software development, not interacting with people, had all these ideas about how to improve their business, and suddenly this opportunity with Granger came up. And this guy said, "Listen, there's this company Granger, and they were small. I think they weren't even $1 billion yet." And I said, "I have no interest. That's such a boring business. I'm not interested." The guy said, "Listen, why don't you just go there on a practice interview?" I said, "All right, fine." This recruiter convinced me to do this. He's like, "They really like your skill set because you understand mainframe software development, and you also understand smaller like computer development, and you understand relational databases,
Hmm.
and that's where the industry is going, and they're trying to figure out how to converge all those things together." And long story short, I joined there in a group called Decision Support, which actually got me really excited because it was the shift from mainframe computing to what we call client server and then end user computing.
Hmm.
And I was building an entire infrastructure and using artificial intelligence back then with new things like uh, DB2 databases were new, building those relational database architectures, putting a AI tool on top of it, which did English query language, so people could ask English questions like you do to Chat GBT, and they
Hmm.
come back with answers. We built all that, and that was really exciting times. And as I got involved in Granger's business, that's where I started getting like, this is exciting stuff. I love because I got to, as a programmer, you touch
Hmm.
everything from marketing to warehouse management to product development, on and on, and finance. And you
Yeah.
kind of learn how all this distribution business runs. And then I wound up working in advanced technology and strategy, and that was where I ended with Granger. But that entire experience being at Granger help me understand how distribution works and the value of how to create a distribution business that adds value to customers, to actually add value, not just, take something and,
Hmm.
mark it up, but rather creating real value. And that's more or less those lessons are what I've been implementing here at Elevate Packaging
Yeah.
because what we do is we try, it's interesting because it's beyond, Elevate's more than a distribution business. It's adding real value to people in a very simple way. And because I'm a software kind of person, I think about things in UX, user experience.
Hmm.
And one of the best UXs, in my opinion, is Google search. Anyone can go to google.com and literally simply know what to do. Like you literally have one line to type something in. Is a really
Yeah.
simple blank screen. But the thing that happens underneath all that, all the algorithms, the technology, the data, all of everything that's happening below the surface is extremely complex and very robust. But the user doesn't have to be, the user doesn't need to know that, and they don't need to interface with that.
Hmm.
And that's to me what Elevate Packaging is. A company, as a business, you just want to make it easy. You just want to have circular compostable packaging. And so in your case, you're like, listen, I've got a small little business. It could be a small business to a big business, but I have a small business. I've got a small coffee shop. I want to be able to sell my croissants and donuts and put them in a compostable bag.
Yeah.
And then when it's after the people are done using it, I want to be able to compost it. And so that whole circular packaging solution is what we offer to the smallest as well as to the biggest clients.
Yeah.
So we have a take back program, and although there's a lot of complexity in how that works, and there's a lot of confusion on what's compostable or etc.,
Hmm.
we make it super simple. Just here's all the packaging. We have the whole range:
Yeah.
tag, labels, tape, stretch wrap for pallets, whatever it is. Any piece of plastic you can eliminate. There's no minimum order. You buy what you need, and
Yep.
you're off. We ship it in a day, and you're off and running. And then when you're done with it, if you can compost it, great. Please compost it. If you can't compost it for whatever reason, you don't have access, send it back to us at no cost, and we will compost it for you.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. That,
that's
and I have so many questions about that aspect of it, because it's a topic that a lot of people don't really think about, and I think the main driver are probably the businesses that that you work with and come to you. But I'm very curious about the even taking a few steps back, like the idea for the company, kind of what was the seed that was planted. Obviously, you had that entrepreneurial
mm-hmm,
kind of thing inside of you. It sounds like Granger. You were there for a good period of time and sort of sharpening your axe and picking up all this great experience. But from some of the research I did on you, I think you have mentioned that you took a sabbatical and did some traveling. And tell me about that really quickly. Like what that sabbatical and that experience and how it played a role in what I think is that first idea of like, hey, I could go and create a company to help solve some of these problems.
uh, well, it starts with me as a person. Me as a person, I'm rooted in problem solving. My master's degree is in industrial engineering. I'm a software development, programming undergrad. I'm a problem solver. I love complex problems and figuring out how to solve them. So the other part that's part of me is that I'm not uh, I'm not driven by money. I'm not driven by success. To me, is a lot of softer, uh, more uh, you know more experiential things. I love if I look at myself as in terms of wealthy and successful person, I would say if I have my family, I'm enjoying time with my friends, I'm spending time doing things I love to do. That to me is my personal definition of success. So when I was at Granger, although I had an amazing career, great mentors, great experience, I always harbored this desire to learn more about the world. For me, that made me a richer person, to be a wiser person, to understand how other people live, to understand, what other countries look like and how life is, and maybe learn from other perspectives. So there were two things I wanted to do. One was I was already um, intent on living overseas. That was my real plan. And so I was privately studying Spanish on my own for years. I also took classes in college. So my thought was that if I could really learn Spanish fluently, I could be working maybe for Granger overseas as an expat. And as I made progress on that, I poured my energy into that. It started to become apparent to me that they looked at me more as a strategist and technologist and not someone that runs a business. So it was difficult for me to make that transition. So one thing I decided was I'm going to go overseas. I'm going to live in another country. Bottom line is I decided to go to Mexico, study at a university there called URLA, Universidad de las Americas, in Puebla, and I was going to study Mexican literature and Spanish. And then because I was leaving this position at Granger, and that course was going to take 2 to 3 months, I'm like, they're not going to keep my seat warm there. So I said, you know what? I've always wanted to see the world. I'm never going to get a chance to go to Asia. It's really far away, and I'd want to go for at least 2 to 4 weeks. So this trip became a global, round the world trip. And I went to our management team, the vice president at the time, and I said, I'd like to take this trip. And he said, I've never done this before, but I'm going to give you a 1 year sabbatical. We'd love to see you come back. I'm not sure you'll ever come back knowing you. And he was right. I did come back after a year, after I traveled, came back, and they offered me an opportunity in Europe because they knew that I wanted to do something overseas. Uh, I just didn't think the position was the right fit for me, and so I didn't do it. And then I went on to do what I did here with Elevate Packaging. Um, but but yeah, that was kind of how things evolved, and my trip overseas, and when I was traveling, I was really focused on learning more about cultures and understanding how the world works. And while I was traveling, I was keeping a journal, and from time to time, I would think of business ideas because this is how I'm wired. And one of the business ideas came about for this business because as I was hiking in so many beautiful places all over the world, I would be so discouraged and disappointed when I see literally in the most pristine remote places plastic, whether it be a potato chip bag or a plastic bottle, and all I can think is like, who would come this far out of their way, this far up, go through all this effort, only to drop some plastic bottles, and not that it was intentional, who knows why, but my point was, this is persistent, this is a problem, this is an interesting problem to solve. So I jotted down my plan for what that would be and left it in my journal, and that was it. When I came back to this country, come back to the United States, it was just after 2000, which was the dot com bust, if you're old enough to remember that.
Mm-hmm.
And technology was in a bad place. A good buddy of mine was a partner at a consulting firm, one of the top he was at Accenture and then also with PCW. And his experience was in wireless networks. And together we started making a plan as I was finishing my trip. We met in Italy. We started making a plan to prepare for a business that was focused on location based services because the cellular phone systems and technology was starting to implement location capabilities. Long story short, we got started on that. We did that for about 8 months, and it wasn't the right time for technology. And that's actually how Elevate Packaging was born, because I didn't have an alternative in technology at the time. And I said, "Well, this is interesting," and it wound up becoming what it is today.
Yeah. So in those very very early days, like the kind of that aha moment of, hey, there's a problem here. I think a business could be created to solve it. What I think the problem is like probably kind of obvious and easy to explain, but what was like the idea for the business in those very very early days? What I imagine it has changed probably a ton over the years with just sort of what things end up working out and direction and technology and all sorts of things. But what was that really early day look like? What was your plan? Did you have a vision for like, hey, I think this I could create a product, I could create a service, a company,
Yeah,
and here's in 5 years, that's what it might look like. What did that look like at the time?
yeah, that's a good question because I think it has to do with problem solving, and there's two components I think in the way that I approach innovation and problem solving. One is I'll define the problem. It's pretty basic, but I'll define the problem on its own merits, and not bring along legacy systems or legacy approaches, and just literally define the problem that you're trying to solve, and then come up with a solution. But there's two. The other aspect is like a continuous development and continuous learning component, and it's like making a business plan, right? So you start
Hmm.
out, you put down your business plan on paper, but you then have to have the discipline and the patience and the open mindedness to throw it away or revise it or admit you are wrong. Or it's not about being right or wrong, but just saying, you know what, this was all on paper and theory. It doesn't really make sense in practice, and that's the second part. So my initial problem was limited. The initial problem I was solving was, if we could just give brands and end users another alternative than plastic, then they could then take this alternative instead of the plastic alternative. Now, the best approach in my mind is compostables. So if we could just make, for example, a compostable stand-up pouch or a compostable label, they then can opt in to take those. But after we got that business, and that was a lot of work because there's a lot of material science and innovation and product development. And I was really consumed in not only doing the product development, but also building out the supply chain to support that, which didn't exist yet. So that's where our time was invested. But soon after we picked our heads up from developing these amazing solutions, I then realized soon that that was not the problem set. It seemed like it at the time, but what the problem set was, it was truly a circular packaging system problem. And so, and why? Because one day we met with our leadership team. It was probably about 7 years ago, and everyone's like, "This is amazing. We're doubling our business. We're growing." And I was so upset. Everyone's like, "How can you be upset? We have got this business we created and it's growing." I said, I never wanted a packaging business. In fact, you'll hear me sometimes say we're the anti-packaging packaging company. That's how the
Mm-hmm.
whole business started. I said, I never wanted a packaging business. I want a business that's going to eliminate plastic and re-enrich the planet. And that's always been our guiding light, our mission since day one, is that I wanted to create a business that was going to eliminate plastic and re-enrich the planet. And thank God we have that North Star, because that's actually what guides us all the time in making our decisions. And that's why we're not a packaging company. And that's why we look really different than every other company out there. For that reason, um, I then started reflecting on how things get composted and realized that the system that was put in place was the wrong system from the beginning, because it was the waste management system. And just by definition, the word waste doesn't fit, because we're talking about materials recovery and resource management. So to me, it's not really a waste management system; it's a resource management system. I went to the whiteboard, and we again figurative whiteboard, and reframed the problem we were trying to solve, and developed a more comprehensive solution, which doesn't really fit conveniently into any industry that exists today. It's a very disruptive solution, because what we understand is that most people that are getting into our sustainable packaging, they really don't like packaging, and they know they have to have it. So they're trying to find the least offensive solution that helps them protect their product. And that's the way we've reframed the way we think about packaging. And as in that, guys, you're not really a packaging company. You're not a waste management or materials resource company, but you're like a full solution, a circular solution. And that's what we offer today, which that's that reference I made to like the Google UX is like, we just want to make it easy. You don't need to know the algorithm that Google uses to get your data or what data it's looking at. You don't need to know all those hairy details. You just need to know that you're going to have a very, yeah, you have a simple need of making, in this case, making the world a cleaner place. You have packaging. You want to make it as easy to run your business without having this waste, be created out of your company,
Mm-hmm.
based on what you're producing. So, I mean, that's a long, long story about, how I look at. I think one part is, one, I define the problem. Two, I'm open to changing our solution as we learn. Part of it is we get smarter. The other part is we hear from customers when we launch something. We listen very carefully to them and what their needs are, what's working for them, what's not working for them, and they generate ideas for us as well. But the next part is, uh, and it's just the way we look at continuous development. When I worked in strategy at Granger, my boss said, we develop a prototype, and then we'd stand on the shoulders of that prototype to see, we get a new perspective, a better a better view to see what's next, and then you'd build that next incremental step and stand on the shoulders of that and continuously improve incrementally, knowing that you can't, as I'd say, hit the bullseye on that first shot. You can't hit it. So just, it's a crawl, walk, run approach. Take it step by step. And, maybe, you're crawling and you're 2 years old. Next minute you're an Olympic athlete, the fastest runner in the world. But that's not going to happen overnight. That can't
Yeah.
happen. You can't write a business plan and make it all work. It's very incremental.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, keeping with the circular theme with like marketing and branding and messaging and like how you position your company and your brand, especially for every company, but especially if you have something that is sort of innovative and disruptive. Uh, it's that exact circular thing that you mentioned, which is doing your best to kind of listen to customers, listen to the problem, talk about the message, and there's a million different ways to talk about how you are potentially solving that problem. And but then that just begins the feedback loop that really never ends, which is figuring out, is it resonating, is it not resonating, what's a clearer way to say it. The whole time you're doing that, your audience is changing, the landscape is changing, and it's the most infuriating thing for a lot of my clients, because I think there's a lot of people who think that, okay, marketing and branding is sort of, you do the work and you implement it, and okay, the website's updated, and now we're good for maybe 10 years before we have to update the website. And they're very disappointed when I tell them that it's the right way to do it is it is a constant thing that you're working on. So that's messaging and branding and marketing in general. But then just running a company and uh, listening to your customers or your prospects um, is I mean, yeah, that's just like a never ending thing. And I'm curious, especially because it seems like your company, Elevate, is pushing for innovation and sort of like you just talked about it a few minutes ago. The sort of general population, I think, always kind of has this attitude of a very binary, like I'm either going to throw something in the garbage or I'm going to throw something in the recycling. And there's people out there who do composting, but I don't think anybody or very few people think of that as something that is an option for the vast majority of people. So I think that is something that you're really pushing for and innovating and partnering with a lot of like companies and organizations to sort of educate people on that one, but then also push for uh, you know um, industry wide or even government and infrastructure, and just sort of like the ability to go do it after you've educated people. It's like got to be a huge challenge, probably from the very beginning of the push and pull of all of that. What how have you sort of navigated that over the years? And again, that probably is something that also never really ends, because you're always striving and pushing for you know pushing things farther, and in theory that could go on forever till you, because if you keep making progress. But how have you kind of navigated that?
But I think fundamentally, there's a concept I believe in. My father used to say it. He says the cream always rises to the top. And I remember I was talking about that because talk about like which schools to go to. If you get to this school, then you'll get a good job. And he actually believed it didn't matter if you are the top and you are the best engineer, the best whatever, you can't help but rise to the top. And I really believe in that. I think that um, if you create the best solution, something that makes a lot of sense, regardless of where all the momentum is and everyone else what they might be touting or what's established or the legacy, it's going to rise to the top. And we see that happen all the time. And it always happens during through innovation and in disruptive innovations. There's this thing. I mean, I always use this example. When it comes to transportation, in the year 1900, there was a very established infrastructure for transportation with the horse and the carriage. And then came along a complete outsider, not from the horse business, not from the carriage business, but this guy, Henry Ford, that came up with this janky little piece of garbage that was called the Model T, that didn't use a horse or a carriage. It was kind of carriage like, but it was a whole new idea. It was a combustion engine. And the people that were in the established industry of transportation didn't acknowledge it. But it was the cream rises to the top. I mean, now today, obviously, it's clear. And it's happened also in many other areas. Like there's a small little company, this guy that thought that people don't need to go to bookstores and that people would buy a book online, and he just took a risk, and every single expert in the publishing and book industry said that's stupid. People want to go into a store, they want to thumb through the pages of the book, it'll never work. And so not only did they not like make that shift themselves, but this other company, Amazon.com, flourished, and they're out of business. It's the same with the horse and carriages. You don't see many horse and carriage businesses anymore. So even though these ideas like at Elevate that we have, they're very disruptive, they're very innovative, they're at the very early stages, but they make sense. When we explain to people, what is it that you care about? Do you care about certifications or do you care about effectiveness? And we have that conversation with them. We say, listen, with this model, with Elevate's model, you can get the majority or a large, large percent of all your compostable packaging composted. If you go with the existing legacy model, you'll be lucky to get 1% of your packaging composted. And as you explain how the system works, and they start to realize, hold on a second, if I go this other route, it's not really meeting effectiveness in terms of, what we say, eliminating plastic and re-enriching the planet. But that's what our guiding light is. So although we're creating something that's very disruptive, new, and innovative and doesn't fit well with the way people think about the legacy systems of packaging and the legacy systems of waste management, it then makes sense as they learn about it. So what has guided us and has helped us persevere and helped us actually establish ourselves as, I'd say, literally a global leader when
Hmm.
people look at what we're doing here, is this vision that we follow that's tied to effectiveness and actual impact as opposed to incremental change from existing legacy systems.
Yeah. Those are all pretty significant, hurdles to overcome along the way. Were there times when you thought, where you like questioned whether or not the business would work? Obviously, you've been in business for 20,
Too
25
many.
years. So,
Yeah.
so what were those moments like? Was it,
Oh, yeah.
what were like the biggest, moments? Like, were there specific moments, I guess I'm asking, that you could think of where you're like, there's just too many,
Yeah.
chicken or egg scenarios here, or there's just too far of a gap to, reach people and educate them on what this could look like. And I'm sure there's a long list of other challenges. Like, what did what did those moments look like, and how did you overcome them? Ultimately, I guess is my question.
Yeah, that's a great, I think, really good question. And it's true. It's I've confronted very, very difficult times, and as a visionary, I hate using that word because it sounds pompous, but I don't mean it that way. But that's what I do. That's what I've done all my life. I didn't realize that, but when I was at Granger and now and other times throughout my career, and that's why I was moved into strategic roles, is I have a way, I have a knack of looking at uh, a wide range of the reality and where we want to go, and looking at all those pieces and how they fit together to come up with a solution that makes the world a better place, and not being influenced too heavily by legacy systems or the past or how things had been done. And that comes from my perspective as a problem solver. So when I first started this business in 2000, no one talked about any of this stuff. I mean, the words we use today didn't really exist in common language. Like, sustainable wasn't a thing. In fact, when I started writing up the business in 1999 and launched in 2000. The only thing that the thing that we would talk about then was triple bottom line. And if you're a little older in the sustainability industry, what you've heard of that. And it meant people, planet, profit. And it meant that you wanted to make it sustainable for the planet, but you also wanted to make it sustainable for people and engage people that were maybe in disadvantaged situations and lift everyone up. And the third part was, obviously it had to make a profit, otherwise it's not sustainable. That's you know Adam
Hmm.
Smith, The Wealth of Nations, The Invisible Hand. Like if it doesn't make sense and people aren't going to pay for it, it's not going to be a viable business.
Yeah.
So that was what we called that back then. Now, as I moved forward, I moved from primarily um, like tree-free papers, paper-based packaging to fully compostable, and that happened in about the year 2005, 2006, when I started to think about I really want to create the best in class solution, regardless of whether people want it or not. And to me,
Yeah.
that meant compostable. So 2007, we developed the world's first compostable adhesive label. In 2008, we we launched it at the Label Expo in Chicago, and no one knew what this stuff was. It was like an alien. And
Yeah.
I remember, I'll never forget, there was one guy that came up to me and said, "So what is this, combustible packaging?" I'm like, "No, I hope not."
Yeah.
You
That
know,
would be bad.
but that's another inflection point where people didn't even know the word compostable in 2008. It
Yeah.
just wasn't part of a conversation.
Yeah.
So coming back to your question, like there were times when I started that to me it made absolutely complete black and white plain sense what I was building. But there was no market for it. So the business people would ask me, well, what's the total addressable market? What do the customers want? And when you're doing something very innovative, that's not what guides you. What guides you is a vision. And it's kind of like when you think about Apple and the iPhone. I mean, everyone was happy with their Blackberries. I had a
Yeah.
Blackberry. I love my buttons and I love that stuff.
Yeah.
I would never have said, you know what I need? I want, instead of my buttons, I want just a screen that I could type on, like swipe and all that. I would have
Yeah.
never said that. But that's the kind of visionary leadership you need when you're trying to drive change. It's something inside you that says this is the right thing. But when I was going forward, there were multiple conversations. I can visualize one of my conversations with my wife at the time, and I said, please look at me in the eyes. Tell me I'm crazy. Tell me I'm doing something wrong, because no one's buying this stuff. No one's into it. In my heart of hearts, believe so deeply that this is the right thing. The world needs this. The world's going there, but it's
Hmm.
so hard to get people to understand what we're doing here.
Yeah.
And she said, "No, stick with it, stick with it." And I remember that was a point for me where I was just like, I'm very confused, because what makes so complete and simple sense to me, I've not yet been able to find the market for it.
Yeah.
So I struggled through those years. And the other parts where I'd always feel like giving up almost was I just didn't have money. I didn't have revenue. I had no
Yeah.
customers. And every once in a while, you get those customers saying, "Wow, this is amazing. This is what we need. This is what we want." And I just kind of stuck with it. And so I'd say through the first 8 years or so of the business, they were every day I'd be like, I just had to dig deep and say this is the right thing. And except for that, there was that one moment I remember I really stepped back and tried to be a bit more honest with myself, to think if I was, heading down, a dead end and didn't know what I was doing. I needed somebody to tell me it was okay.
Yeah. And so around that time of like 2007, 2008, the example you gave of kind of talking to some industry people about compostable labels and stickers and solutions, how many products like did you have at that time? Like total, did you like what did the team look like? Or at what point could you even say I have a team? Like how did that look like in those early
Yeah.
days?
So the very, very, very early days, it was just me initially, and
Yeah.
then me and one person. And it was the two of us handling everything. I did all the development, product development, all the business planning, blah blah blah, all that stuff. And this person was like a assistant to help me with invoice processing and things like purchasing and things like that. So in the early days, the business was using invasive species of plants to take the fibers from that and make papers, tree-free papers. And we built the business around these sustainable um, fibers that could be used to make paper products that could be papered with recycled with paper. And what I did was I was working with um, remote communities in Asia, in Philippines and Thailand, and they were making the papers for us. And then they were making. I was like, how can we sell this stuff? Because we have to differentiate. So we made custom boxes, primarily gift boxes, like for chocolates and for fancy gifts. And one of our first clients was we were on the cover of Dina DeLuca for a beautiful heart-shaped box that held a bunch of gourmet candies, and that was kind of how the business started. But as that business scaled, the artisans that were making the papers for me started complaining that it was a lot of work. And I thought, what can I do still in line with sustainability? Well, things started to develop slowly there. And there was an adhesive that I used to make a compostable label. So I basically combined, I said, I only need your paper. We took a hemp based paper and we then made an adhesive label. Now that took about a year of development because I didn't know anything about how to make a, you know, adhesive coated labels, you know. So that took a year of development and worked with a consultant to do that. And then in 2007, we finished that product, launched it, but as I mentioned, when we launched it, even though we built this amazing solution, and I now am using only the papers from this community and alleviated that stress for them, the market didn't know what it was. They didn't know how to sell it. It cost, many times more expensive than a regular paper label.
Mm-hmm.
And so that business sat and floundered for about 2 to 3 years. And that was also a very difficult time because if you remember 2008, there was a financial crisis. And so, it was a really bad time for business. So we just hung in there. And then suddenly, around 2010, we started getting inquiries from Europe. People in Europe saying, "Hey, I just read in some trade magazine that you have a compostable label. This is exactly what we need." And long story short, that's what got the business going again. So
Yeah.
and then from there it started growing. But at that time, yeah, we had boxes. Then we shifted to labels, and then once the labels business started taking hold, I focused only on labels. And for a number of years, we did only labels. Uh, Probably about 3 to 4 years, and then we started moving into flexible packaging. I said, you know what? Labels go on things. If it's a compostable label, they need compostable packaging. I said, where's the gap in the market? There were already clamshells and
Mm-hmm.
cups and things like that. And I said, you know what? I'm going to develop a whole flexible packaging line. And so again, dusted off our product development innovation, you know, desk and started to get to work on building the world's first range of flexible packaging.
Yeah. And when it came time to like start marketing that and selling it and positioning it and educating your target audience on that, what was your like, did you have a really specific audience that you identified? I mean, obviously, like consumer packaged goods brands are probably the bread and butter, but like, how did you kind of zero in those days and figure out, all right, what's what's the right message, what's the right blend of marketing, selling, educating? What was like that process like for you guys?
So fortunately, because I had built a label business, I already had a wide range of clients. So we were starting, as I said, as I explained to people, it's difficult to find the market when you're starting a business like that. These people are in nooks and crannies. You can't find them. They're just
Mm-hmm.
in nooks and crannies. They could be a small little vendor at a farmer's market. They could be a business in California. You can't find these people. But the way you find them is you put out what I say a lightning rod. And our lightning rod was our website and all our marketing materials. So we said, by putting the shingle out there, we've got our website, we got marketing materials, we're messaging, 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 and people that want to hear that message, they connect to it. So at that point, we'd already built a business that of people that liked our labels. So again, my line of thinking was those labels are going on things, and if they need flexible packaging, that then
Mm-hmm.
that's how we'll find those customers, and that's exactly what happened.
Yeah.
They said, "Oh, great! Now you also have flexible packaging. I need that too." And then it kind of grows upon itself because then people say, "Oh, wow, that's compostable. Where'd you get that?" And
Yeah.
really, what we've done, because the market's so hard to find, through marketing and word of mouth and good, plain, honorable business with quality products, helping customers, answering their questions, being uber focused on what we do. Like, we don't do anything else. We only do compostables. We're experts in the world when it comes to compostable packaging. Because that's our niche, that number one builds confidence that we're the authority, and number two, it helps us help our customers learn more and you know understand how to navigate themselves to a world of sustainable packaging.
Mm-hmm. And was the messaging predominantly like kind of like you mentioned, not direct sort of sales? Because again, it's very, like you said, it's very hard to find the right people who are even
Yeah.
open to hearing that message. Was it more like, this is our mission, this is the problem we're trying to solve, this is why we're trying to solve it, and here's how we're going to do it? And if that resonates with you at all or aligned with your brand and your message, your mission, then that sort of
Right.
how you kind of brought those people to you.
Yeah, yeah. The thing about this is it's completely voluntary. And again, to go back to, Adam Smith, The Wealth of Nations, Invisible Hand, if there's a market for it, it will rise.
Mm-hmm.
And so, some of the things we sell, they're going to cost more. They're going to cost more than plastic. So that person that wants it has to understand the value of that. And for that reason, you know, there's no, well, now more and more there are laws. But at that point early on, it's really people that have to connect with the vision that you have. And they have to connect with the value of what that brings, which is not always so easy to measure. So our approach again to marketing was, let's just tell them what we're about, tell them about the mission we are pursuing, tell them what we think the future world needs to look like. And if that resonates with them, they're going to want to learn more about us. The other thing I also believe is that, people don't want to be sold or they just don't want to be forced, down this path of buy this, act now, and that kind of stuff. We don't take that approach. We're literally, especially the way I'm not a capitalist in that sense of, like, I'm not trying to build. There's a million other ways I could have made more money and done more,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm out here trying to provide a solution to make the world a better place. And we stay. That's the thing that makes us unique. We're not running a packaging company. We're really trying to provide a solution that makes the world a better place. And we're listening, we're working with our customers, we're supporting them. And that's where we get that connection, is that we're trying to solve a problem collaboratively. And oftentimes they say sustainability is a team sport. It's not like we build this and we shove it down your throat. We have to work together to solve this existential problem of climate change. And collaboratively, we work with our customers all the time to get there. And so when it comes to marketing, it's more of like just trying to make it more clear for them, what are we doing? Why are we doing it? And how can it help you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Did you have any kind of aha moments along the way for marketing, or moments that, um, obviously the strategy was like, we have this story, we have this message of kind of who we are and what we believe in and what we're doing, and did you have any like campaigns or tactics that kind of surprised you as a way of like, hey, we were able to you know reach a lot of the right people with this message in this way? Or on the flip
Yeah.
side, was there anything that you did that you thought, hey, this is going to work, and then it just sort of fell flat completely? Either way, you're
Yeah.
learning a lot, right?
I'll tell you a story about both of those.
Okay.
So, um, Yeah, the first thing is, I think it's about, how I was raised. My parents believe that you should be honest and upright, do the right thing, help people out, help people when you can help them, right? And so I bring that into our company. I'm I'm very focused on ensuring that we are helping people. We're not trying to sell to people. I don't want anyone selling to people. In fact, I'd be happy to tell them you're better off not buying any packaging. You know what? That's excessive. You don't need that packaging, whether it's from us, which is compostable, or not, because we are truly, I think if you take that approach of just trying to help people get to a solution that makes business better and the world better, you will you will you will come to the right solutions and you'll grow, and you're growing the right way. So that's the way we approach it, and that's what we find successful. And I really am on top of our entire team when I say, guys, I don't want you, selling more than we need to sell. Help these customers solve their problem. Just focus on that, and the cream will rise to the top. The second thing is, we've tried so many times and failed miserably. We would every so often send out a campaign for 20% off this week only, 20% off, and we never get any sales. And it blows my mind too, because sometimes we're selecting customers, we know they buy those things, for
Hmm.
example, and we'll send out a campaign to those customers because they buy that regularly, we see them buying it, and they're just not responding to it, and they keep buying on their regular schedule. So I've been saying, let's just keep helping people. Let's just always be there for them. That's the best way for us to serve our community. And if they have questions, let's tell them the answers authentically. One of our um, products is a mailer. It's a plastic mailer for shipping. And I know, because I've been doing this longer than most anyone, I know that the adhesive strip on the end of that mailer that closes the flap is not compostable. I know because we're involved in making compostable adhesives, and I know that doesn't exist. But other companies would say, please compost this bag, which I think is inauthentic, or the bag's compostable. And on our bags, we say, this bag's compostable. However, that little strip at the end is not. So please cut that off. And the reason why we do that is because not just we're trying to tell the truth only, but we care about composters. We care about effectiveness. And if that goes into a compost pile, our friends, the composters, get a piece of plastic waste in their end compost, and it disrupts the entire system. It discourages them to take compostable packaging. And it also creates a problem for them, for their business. They can't sell their product. I mean, the last thing you want to do when you're, you know, taking compost to put in your garden to grow your vegetables is find pieces of plastic, whether it be like a banana sticker, little PLU sticker, or a little piece of
Hmm.
plastic. You're not going to like that, and you're not going to buy that product anymore. So, we do take a holistic view of the whole, like I said, sustainability is a team sport. The whole cycle has to work together. We just don't work in a vacuum, in isolation. So that's kind of how we approach our marketing,
Hmm.
in that, like, we just have to try to give people all the information, be as transparent as possible, tell the truth, what works, what doesn't work. If there's a better way, we'll definitely do it. Like, if there was a little seal that could be compostable, we'll be the first ones to put it on there. But
Yeah.
what we're going to do is we're going to tell you everything, the truth, and be completely honest, because that is respectful to them, respecting their intelligence, respecting that they can make good decisions if they're given the right information.
Yeah. Yeah. When it comes to getting the right information, I it's this is something I'm so interested in because I've worked with clients that are B2B companies, but there's this other like layer to what they do, which is like B2B2C, because there's oftentimes either marketing or information or educational stuff or content that that client is providing for their clients, but then their customers, it's like just multiple layers. So is that something, I mean, do you have a story about a customer or a project that you worked on where, you were able to, work with a customer of yours and sort of help them with, maybe some of their marketing or how they position their company and their brand? And because like, if you have the same mission, there's like different stages of the chain, right? That goes down to like the ultimate end user who needs to be the one taking some responsibility for the actual composting, right? So
Yeah.
how do you have stories of like working with customers or clients in that way?
Yeah, there's, as you say that, there's a few things that we do that come to mind. First of all, I'll start out by saying we're not great at marketing. With all that being said, we're not great at marketing and we're not great at sales. I mean, those are two big things. We're really nowhere near as good as our competition. I think they're more sales and marketing heavy and less on the back end.
Hmm.
We're definitely, and it might be my background as an engineer, as someone that came into this not as a packaging person, but wanting to solve this problem. We really like completely absorb ourselves in solving the underlying problem of, making sure that all the stuff we sell actually gets composted, making sure that we always have it on the shelf, making sure it's the best quality in its category. And my belief is if you do those things right, that's the cream rises to the top again. If you can do those things right, you make the right product, make it work in compost, and make it available for people, that will take care of itself. What we haven't done is really, that's our sales and marketing, frankly. What we haven't done is invest much in sales and marketing. But um, that being said, um, what we do to try to connect to that end customer, because we have our customers, the brand, we provide them loads of information, whatever they might need. I just did this just yesterday. One small customer that was using our packaging for some nuts, he had some questions about our circular program. And I wrote him probably 3 pages explaining how it works, how the existing legacy system works or doesn't work in this matter, and why this approach makes sense. He came back and said, I am a true believer in Elevate. I love the model. I'm gonna push this forward and also share this with my clients. And that's usually how it's working. We're helping them through this process of learning and being able to take that message forward. The two ways that are more marketing esque that we do this, I'd say, is one is all of our packaging is marked compostable. So we want to make sure that their end customer knows what to do with it,
Hmm.
because when you get, and it's a cost to us, we add that cost because why? I care that we're diverting all these materials away from landfills and into the compost bins. That's where they belong. And if that end customer doesn't know what to do with it, because it looks exactly the same, we do such a great job of engineering these compostable solutions to look, feel, act, behave just like plastic, except they're compostable. And I got that compliment and complaint from another customer saying, Rich, these are amazing. I can't tell the difference. But it's also a problem because we got to make sure everyone knows what to do with these things. And he
Hmm.
says they last, it's amazing how they last long. I've had this for a few years. It's still holding up, like no change at all. I said, that's a lot of the back end engineering that we've done. But we need to make sure that their customers, one, know what to do with it because we really want to get it into the compost. But number two, it creates awareness. The one that doesn't know about that says, "Whoa, what's that compostable?" And
Hmm.
it drives them some curiosity, interest to say, "What does that mean?" Or dialogue with somebody. What is this? Or research it. And that awareness piece is also a responsibility for our company as we're trying to drive change, and we're making literally year after year we're getting bigger, more successful. So one is that we mark all of our packaging compostable at our expense because we want everyone to know what it is and about it. And the other thing is to make it easy. Our clients sometimes they also don't want to be seen as greenwashers. So very often you'll see our clients they'll put a link on their website. It'll say we use Elevate Packaging, and it's kind of like there's a lot to this. This company's pretty deep. but here's the link, check them out. And
Hmm.
that's a short-handed way for them to be able to say, listen, we're legit. This packaging legit. Go ahead and diligence in themselves. And these days, people like yourself, there's so much content on the web. If you do a little search on Elevate Packaging, you're going to find 25 years of very authentic content that's consistent, the same message over and over, that we do care about this existential problem about climate change. And that's our driving factor, not to build a packaging company. And when people learn that about us and how we build the product and the quality of the product that we build, I think that gives their end customer the confidence that all that messaging that they need to have. That being said, Dan, I probably need a marketing company to help us elevate and extend that, distribute that message.
Yeah. I'm also curious, do you have any like cool stories about seeing your products in the wild, or just stories of really interesting, surprising use cases of companies that have worked with you or bought from you?
Well, the first one right away, I smiled because I was in a remote, small beach town in Michigan, along Lake Michigan. We were in this tiny little town, and I love lattes and espresso, and I'm pretty particular. So I did a little research. I found this little tiny coffee shop that was just around for a year, and we went there, and it was amazing coffee. And I found um, they had something. I think they had some packaging, and they had said they had some packaging for the coffee. I think it was a coffee bag. I said, you know what? You should use compostable coffee bags. And she said, we do. I'm like, no, are you sure? She said, yeah, here. There's this company, Elevate Packaging. We buy this from. And she goes, and we get everything from them. We get their cellophane bags for our donuts and croissants, and we have their stickers and blah, blah, blah. She went on and on. And I said, oh, I happen to own the company. It was kind of a funny moment because it was a tiny little shop. And it was
Yeah.
a really cool moment of seeing our product in the wild. But and the exciting thing is, all the time we have our customers or friends that say, "Hey, I saw your products," here and there. So that's exciting because especially coming from the early days when I couldn't get anyone to even understand what the hell we were doing.
Yeah.
Now, people come to me and say, "Yeah, oh yeah, we know your product. We of course we know Elevate." One of our we were at a trade show, and a pretty major packaging company came to us and they said, "You realize that you're well known throughout the country for what you guys are doing. You guys are the name when it comes to compostable packaging. You guys are really respected." And it made me feel really good because this has been a lifetime of disciplined work. Really sticking to our knitting, like really staying the course of not trying to go after the shiny object, and just staying the course of let's keep building something that adds value, that brings value, that makes a lot of sense. And it feels good to hear that.
Yeah. It sounds like one of those one of those examples of you got your head down, you're committed to the mission and the day to day, and days go by, weeks, months, years, and then all of a sudden you look up and you go, oh my gosh, there some of that recognition is there, or some of those
Mm-hmm.
interesting customers are there, and yeah, as an entrepreneur, as a founder and a business owner, sometimes you're just so busy looking down at what you're working on that you take a step up, and the joke is always you kind of look backwards and you kind of, oh my gosh, we actually have gone pretty far. And over the course of 20, 25 years, I'm sure you've had a lot of those moments.
Yeah, I'm glad you bring that up because that's something I force our team to do. We have an amazing team. We have just the people not only are really brilliant at what they do, they're so dedicated to the mission. Everyone is so dedicated to our mission. They're not just there for a job. And we work hard. And so every so often I will pause, every week we have a meeting to reflect for the week, like how'd the week go. But I'll every so often ask everyone to pause and look back even longer, like 6 months, a year, 4 years, 5 years. And even on myself, we have to do that. And we pick our head up and we say, holy cow, I can tell you a story in 2008 when some guy didn't even know the word compostable and he called it combustible. And I can tell stories about how when I first started, people didn't even talk about climate change. That wasn't a thing. It was not even a thing. It was like I think in 2004 is when Al Gore had his
Hmm.
Inconvenient Truth, and I can tell you stories when I was invited in I think 2005 or so to go to Pack Expo for free to have a booth, and I didn't understand why they were doing that. But the guy that was organizing that show was a visionary himself, and here I am with our hemp paper stuff and these labels that were funky, and I was so discouraged because next to me was the guy that sold aluminum to Coca Cola, and then the other guy, next to me had like plastic that was sold to Tide for their. I'm like, where? How am I in this space with my hemp paper?
Yeah.
They had me speak the last day of the conference. I'm like, oh, that's so like demeaning. And I was like, the last day when everyone's leaving, they're packing their bags. The trade show was half empty. It felt like, and I was just like, the guy comes running. He's like, "Rich, you're on. Your session started like 5 minutes ago." I'm like, "Oh yeah, I'm coming. I'm coming." I get there, and this is around. I have to look. It was about 2005. It's standing room only. I was like blown away. Standing room only. There were double doors to get into the meeting room, and people couldn't get in. They couldn't even. They were standing in the thing, and then people were pouring out of the double doors trying to lean in to see. I'm like, holy crap! What do they
Wow.
want me to tell them? This was the beginning of all the major. We're talking about Fortune 1000, Fortune 500, major corporations wanting to know what is sustainability. What is this thing that we've been hearing about called sustainability? And and it was a humbling moment for me and an exciting moment for me because that was the point when I started to understand like, this is a thing. I'm onto something. The thing that we've been working on since 2000, this vision I had back in 1999, is actually makes a lot of sense. And that gave me my fortitude. Also, another point, the fortitude to be like, stick on this. This is the right thing. And I should dust off that old presentation, but it was really describing of our what we called a what we called sustainable packaging, which
Yeah.
was not even a word at the time. It was just becoming a word. Um, yeah, I remember all the big guys were there from Walmart, Kimberly Clark, et cetera, et cetera. And I just remember them coming to me, can we get your papers? Can we get your presentation? And
Hmm.
they were just at that point of understanding what that meant. So yeah, it's been a journey. And
Yeah. And that's a good segue. I'm curious what's next for Elevate? Is it more innovation? Is it more focused on growth? I mean, based on what you just talked about, it sounds like the larger and larger companies are starting to dig into this corner of the industry and explore, and so that to me says there maybe some growth opportunities there and challenges, or is it more continuing and pushing on like the innovation side of things, on the product side of things, or is it also like I'm all over the place? But it's to me, it's like wrapping my head around all these different angles is super interesting. Is it more adoption and pushing for the innovation on that side of it? What's next for Elevate? Where do you see things going in the next couple of years?
yeah, fortunately, we have a really strong discipline to our guiding light, our North Star. And it remains the same from day one. And it's to eliminate plastic packaging and re enrich the planet. And those two things are important because to eliminate plastic packaging, what that means is wherever we see plastic, we're looking to provide an alternative. And we're not only looking to provide an alternative, but we might want to make it super simple to access. No minimums, just make it really easy for you to make that decision. The other part of the equation is and to so it's to eliminate plastic packaging and to re-enrich the planet. The enrich the planet part means if we're not getting those raw materials that can be composted back into the soil, that's a problem. And if we're not doing it in a way that makes the planet healthier and better and lowers carbon emissions, we're not doing it the right way. So we've got a range of projects that cover those two gamuts in how we deliver that solution so easy to the customer. The other part is, we really want to make it easy for the customer. So at the end of the day, that's our mission of the problem we're trying to solve, but we have to make it easy to engage. It's a short way probably of saying all of what you said is where we're continuing to work. We continue to do innovation. We continue to create a broader range of solutions. We continue to work with distributors to distribute our product out there so that it gets into more hands. We continue to find more markets, digging deeper in the markets that we have already, which is food and supplements and cannabis and, apparel. And we continue to also evolve I'd say our circular solution to make the circular solution simple for people to understand, simple for people to engage in, and by working in coordination with the nonprofit, the Compost Stewardship Institute, which collects all compostable materials from any source, not just Elevate, but anywhere. It's getting all those compostable materials from Elevate and others into the compost and out of the landfill. So there's a lot of work to do, but I think all these pieces together, we keep on progressing forward, which is what we've been doing from day one, as long as it keeps, with that northern star that we're shooting for. And as we get more money, we keep investing. That's our model. It's like we really aren't looking. We don't look at profitability as our guiding or revenue per se, but more like impact. The more impact we can create, the more success we're going to have. And like I said, if we use that as our guiding light, and in doing that, we do get more profitable and we do get more revenue because we're helping solve problems.
Yeah. And just a couple final questions for you. I'm thinking that you probably just answered this question a second ago, but I'm going to ask it again anyways because I think it's a good question and you might have a little bit of a different spin on it. But I'm just curious, what advice would you give to other entrepreneurs that are maybe an earlier stage of a similar business and they want to align their business with a greater purpose and finding the ways to kind of stay true to that as you're growing and scaling a business because it is hard.
Yeah, I think you have to be honest with yourself to know that that's what motivates you. If you get into that situation, and when I started my business, all the material things that I had in my life, I had a very comfortable life before, they evaporated, and so you may not have to experience that. I did because I was breaking into a completely new pioneering area didn't exist, and I had to build a market. So if that's what you're doing, you have to be comfortable with that as a possibility. I think that's one thing because that will break you. That will break you. Um, I don't need much, so I'm okay with that. The second part I'd say is you have to understand what your guiding purpose is, and make that clear and stick to it. The way you get there might change. The how you get there, what you do might change. But if you're trying to solve some larger mission, address a larger mission, um, keep that focus. At some point, you might find that it was a bad idea, and you have to be able to bail on that. That would be bailing on the whole thing. But on the micro level, as you're moving forward, like whether it be a marketing plan on how to do it, a product, if you're finding it's not fitting, you have to have the discipline to stick with it long enough to where you gave it a chance, but also the discipline to let it go, even if it's your pet project. for me, I held on to some parts of my business too long. One of the parts that I held on very long was supporting the community in Asia. And it didn't make as much sense as my business grew. And we've moved on from that being our supply source. But it was really difficult for me because of that human aspect and how I
Yeah.
wanted to also incorporate that. So that was an example of how the how to wasn't working for us at some point. Um, and all in all, even for us, as you grow a business, it's it's constantly evolving. You have to throw away what worked and build something new. And oftentimes, the thing that got you to where you are isn't the thing that's going to get you to the next step. And that's something else to be aware of. And we see that with systems, with some processes and solutions, approaches, strategies. We're like, that doesn't work anymore. That helped get us to that step, but now we got to implement this next thing. And it's the constant churn that you and I were talking about earlier at the beginning.
Mhm.
Is that you start out doing your marketing, you build your website, you're done. You're never done. It's always changing, and the thing that was working won't work anymore later because Google's algorithm changed or something like that.
Yeah. 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 I mean, it's marketing is the same, branding's the same, growing a business strategy is the same. There's no checklist, there's no blueprint, there's no silver bullet, and it's kind of frustrating and infuriating because I think there's so many people out there that kind of claim that there is and they've got the secret sauce. But it's why I love having these conversations because those real life stories and experiences and guiding principles and like the strategies that you implemented and the way that you implemented them are typically what I think help people sort of take away bits and pieces and see what applies to them. And it's not a checklist, it's not a blueprint, but it's helpful for people. So I appreciate your time. I have one final question for you, and it's an easy one. What does Rich Cohen do to relax?
That's a harder question than you might realize.
Yeah, or
Um,
maybe the question is, does Rich Cohen do anything to relax outside of work? What do you do to unplug, unwind?
Yeah, what's interesting is I've been doing this for 25 years, and every day I'm excited to do this business because it's such a fun problem to work on. That the thing we were just talking about, how it's always changing. Just when you thought you got solved, that's what motivates me. I love it. And to me, my work is a lot of fun. I really enjoy it. Totally enjoy it. I think our staff does too. It's the same for them. If you don't like a rote, regular, repetitive type of situation, our business is great. But what I do for fun, really, I do need to relax because I work hard, I work long hours, and I have a lot of stress related to that. I love exercising. When I was younger, I was a competitive distance runner and triathlete, and my body can't do as much as I did before. But I have to do my yoga. I got to get my yoga in at least 2 times a week, if not more, and I've got to get 1 or 2 workouts in, and swimming. Oh man, it's the best. It's like swimming has a double whammy because not only does it relax me because there's nothing to look at, you look at the bottom of a pool, but
Hmm.
there's there's studies on this. That's where my best thinking happens. When your mind has nothing to do and it's
Yeah.
resting, it's processing in the background. And I'll get in the pool. I won't have anything in mind to think about. I'm just like, I'm going swimming. And next you know, as I'm get bored after like 20 minutes, my brain starts wandering on its own, solving problems. And that's something I used to do when I was at Granger. I'd go run at lunch. On my lunch hour, I'd go run a 10K every lunch hour, and I'd be doing some software development thing. I'm like, damn, it's time for lunch. I'm working on this. I can't figure it out. Right after I came back to my desk, I know exactly how to solve that.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
I know it's amazing how your brain works like that. So I
Yeah.
think I'd recommend to everybody, like, do something that allows you to get lost, and not only does it relax you, it really drives some nice creative thought.
Yeah. No, I can relate. I have run a bunch of marathons, not so much the last couple of years, although I am doing the Chicago Marathon next year. But yeah, that's like one of the few times where I can totally turn off my brain. But then at the same time, it's not really turning it off. It's just like a clarity, and there's less noise and less
Yeah.
distractions, and yeah, it's just like a very nice place to be in terms of like your headspace when you've are like going to be running for 3 hours, and maybe you've got a
Right.
podcast in, or maybe there's nothing and you're just kind of alone with your thoughts,
Yeah.
but there's no phone, there's no computer, there's no Netflix, there's no nothing else. So yeah, that's great.
That's my
Um,
happy place. Yeah.
yeah, and I my hats off to you for doing all the triathlons. I did one, and I was always a very strong swimmer, but the second I had to kind of do it in that competitive way, it was, oh boy, it was hard.
Yeah, that's my weakest link, the swimming, and then the one triathlon I'd always avoid was the Chicago triathlon because they do it in waves, and if you swim, you come up on the wave ahead of you, and one time I came up on some guy and you're in the lake, you can't see that all that well and ahead of you, and some guy like was kicking, and his
Mm.
heel knocked me right square in the forehead. I saw stars, and I think it's really dangerous to do it that way. So I would never, after that, I never did that race again.
Yeah, well, there's a reason why they do swimming first.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah,
But yeah, that's it's great talking to you, Dan. We should
yeah,
stay in touch. I somehow didn't realize you're here in Chicago too. So
yeah, yeah. I
let's
mean, we're
let's try to connect.
very, very close in proximity, just on the north side of the city. So yeah, let's definitely stay in touch. I appreciate the time. I know these are probably a little bit longer conversations than typical sort of interview podcast conversations go, but I really enjoyed it, and I appreciate the time.
Yeah. Thanks for your time too. I appreciate you having me here. Thanks.
All right, thanks, Rich.
Take care.
Bye bye.